I also think that our European leaders should start a dialogue with the Iranian opposition. The biggest fear for the Iranian regime is Mrs. Rajavi and her movement. The rocket attack against Camp Liberty residents who are defenseless is a strong indication of this. Our European governments should not put all their eggs in the basket of the mullah. They should side with the people of Iran who want democracy and recognize the Iranian resistance. Thank you. I will now give the floor to the President of the Iranian Resistance, Ms. Rajavi. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, d'abord, je voudrais vous remercier pour cette initiative très importante, organiser cette conférence sur le sujet très important, c'est les violations des droits de l'homme en Iran et aussi l'ingérence du régime de Mullah dans la Syrie. Et le résultat, c'est a créé Daesh, c'est le Bachar al-Assad qui a créé Daesh, et aussi beaucoup d'émigrants des Syriens en Europe. C'est le résultat de Bachar al-Assad. Malheureusement, Bachar al-Assad était resté au pouvoir à cause de soutenir le régime de Mullah. Et c'est pour ça maintenant c'est un grand problème, pas seulement pour le Moyen-Orient, aussi pour l'Europe et le monde entier. Et aussi, je veux parler sur le sujet de soi-disant élections en Iran et sur le sujet de l'illusion des modérations et mirage de modération en Iran.
Dowlat Nowrouzi, you're here today representing the National Council of Resistance of Iran, a very moderate party, which I believe you are the UK representative of. Clearly, the talk at the moment is the relationship that now exists between the EU and Iran following the recent elections. How well do you think the relationship is going to go from now on?
Well, we hope that the European Union would realize the true reality in Iran, not many propagandas made by various organs of this regime. We all know, particularly as Iranians, that what happened had nothing to do with a free or any fair election. We are not facing a democracy in Iran. It is a theocracy. So what happened was actually a sham election. We call it a selection between various officials of a regime, the current one and the old one. But both of them, various factions of them, have been equivocally involved in massacre, murder, and severe violations of human rights against human rights activists, political activists, Iranian dissidents that for quite many years have a struggle for freedom and democracy. So they share the same criminal record in terms of both crimes against humanity committed by that regime, as well as export of terrorism and fundamentalism. So we hope that the European Union would realize now that any promotion or upgrading of their economic and trade or political relationship with that regime must be totally dependent upon a stop and a halt in executions and a major change in terms of human rights and social economic justice in Iran.
Seems to me, therefore, that what you're saying is the election was something of a sham and that the party that's got in, while purporting to be more moderate, isn't. Now, your party is a far more moderate construct. What chances do you feel that you will have of influencing what is going on in Iran with the party that's in power?
Well, I have to say that the Iranian genuine opposition movement has a huge grassroots support amongst all Iranians for many years of its dedication for democracy, human rights in Iran. I think definitely what we would see within the regime, pinning any hope that there may be some moderation coming out of it, is an illusion. It's been our experience for some 3 decades now. Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, have on a number of occasions stressed that you cannot expect a viper give birth to a dove. We really don't expect to see any moderate mullah coming out of the whole establishment of a religious theocratic regime which is based on the absolute rule of clergy, or what they call velayat faqih system. But in terms of what will happen within Iran after this sham election, we expect that both from within the regime, the rift that already had existed between the two main factions of this regime, as well as the whole public discontent would definitely intensify. And we know that the regime has no solution. They have no way out of various crises that they have been surrounded with, politically, economically, because of the corruption and the repression. So we think that the outcome would be definitely going towards a major change from within Iran, and most probably huge public uprising.
There's real troubles in Syria at the moment, obviously, and I understand that your party has very specific opinions concerning Russia's role in Syria. Would you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes, of course. I think perhaps anyone following the situation that knows about huge involvement of the Iranian regime in meddling into the affairs of Syria, particularly dispatching the heads of revolutionary guards to carry out the war against the Syrian people, as well as thousands of the Hezbollah forces and others from other countries such as Afghanistan and Pakistan, recruited by the Iranian regime revolutionary guards and Quds force, dispatched to Syria in order to help dictator Bashar Assad to stay in power and continue massacre of the Syrian people. I think it is the worst and very unfortunate to see that Putin has been very much in cooperation, close cooperation with both dictators in Iran and Assad in Syria. We've received very recent information that the Iranian regime, after lifting of the sanctions, had spent at least $2.5 to $3 billion in order to purchase very sophisticated weapons such as Sukhoi airplanes, helicopters, tanks, and missiles from Putin, and they had been delivered to Bashar Assad in order to be able to continue the war. So we think that their role is been totally counterproductive. It's been obviously a crime against humanity committed particularly by the Iranian regime, Bashar Assad and Putin, against the Syrian people, particularly the major Syrian People's Opposition Movement. And we think the solution is, of course, for the world community to be decisive, to cut off the hands of Iranian regime from continuation of the meddling in Syria, and also to support the Syrian People Opposition Movement for a major change and expel of Bashar Assad, because I think he must face justice in an international trial for the crimes that he committed against its own people.
And you're in the European Parliament today. Finally, what are you expecting, what are you hoping that the EU, the European Commission, the European Parliament can do?
Mrs. Maryam Rajavi has been invited at the European Parliament, and we are very much hoping that her message would be strongly heard and taken seriously. We hope that we would be able, through her efforts, and particularly many members of Parliament from all various political parties, to continue Madam Rajavi's recommendations over what EU should do in terms of challenging which Iran and the whole of the Middle East now in crisis. We hope they realize the money that had been released to Iranian regime now been given to Putin to purchase very sophisticated weapons and be provided to Bashar Assad to continue killing and murder of Syrian people, which the next step would be facing huge number of Syrian refugees coming from Syria towards Europe, which is actually, in our view, a human catastrophe for all. whether the Europeans that have to somehow deal with this crisis, as well as the regional countries, particularly the Syrian people. It is very heartbreaking. I think that needs to be stopped. They need to have a much more wiser policy in terms of their vital interest with Europe, as well as the whole stability in the region and the Middle East. They have to realize that this can only happen when there are true democratic governments, especially in power in Iran, as well as in Syria. So it's time for the European Union to side with millions of Iranian people organized through its opposition movement led by Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, as well as standing with the Syrian people's opposition in order to really bring about a major democratic change in both countries. And I think that's essential in order to have a stable and secure, safe world community and the region.